Hello everyone, my name is Kyle Lyles and today I'd like to talk to you about the impact that stand your ground laws have had on homicide rates across the nation. The controversies surrounding stand your ground laws have recently moved to the forefront of public attention in the United States due to the recent acquittal of George Zimmerman in the killing of Trayvon Martin. Now, historically, the right to defend one's home against intruders is protected by the castle doctrine law in the United States. This is rooted in the notion that a man's home is his castle, therefore he has no duty to retreat but to protect his home. In 2005 and since then, Florida and other states have implemented some version of the stand your ground law, which has extended one's self-defense rights to apply to places outside of one's home. And from the flood of media coverage and public attention over the Trayvon Martin case, people have learned that stand your ground laws have allowed individuals to use force, even lethal, in self-defense when there is reasonable belief of a threat without having any duty to retreat first. What has not been heavily highlighted, though, is the impact of stand your ground laws in terms of crime and victimization. There is empirical evidence that has found that these laws are associated with a significant augment in the number of homicides, emergency room visits, and hospital discharges related to firearm injuries due to the adoption of these laws. Now, as you may or may not know, an incident occurred on February 26, 2012, where 17-year-old Trayvon Martin was shot and killed by Community Watch Coordinator George Zimmerman. In his defense, Zimmerman cited Florida's stand your ground law and on that basis was acquitted. This has recently ignited controversy and brought stand your ground laws to the forefront of people's attention. Now, to give some background information, stand your ground laws originate from castle doctrine laws. Generally, the castle doctrine provides that someone attacked in his home can use reasonable force, even deadly force, to protect his or another's life without any duty to retreat from the attacker. It is defined differently in different states, and the name appears to have its origin from the English common law, which protects a person's home and uses the phrase, one's home is one's castle. In recent years, though, a number of states have adopted or considered bills referred to as castle doctrine bills, which expand the circumstances where a person can use self-defense without retreating and contain other provisions such as immunity for someone who legally uses force in self-defense. And these are called stand your ground laws. Now, here's just a chart that highlights some of the similarities and difference between the two laws. As you can see, both involve self-defense and the use of deadly force if one is threatened. However, the castle doctrine law applies only to one's home, job, or work, whereas stand your ground laws applies to any place that one is legally allowed to be. The laws for stand your ground differs between states, and to Florida specifically, its statute states that a person is justified in the use of deadly force and does not have a duty to retreat if he or she reasonably believes that such force is necessary to prevent imminent death or great bodily harm. Now, here's just a visual that shows you the different states that have stand your ground law, castle doctrine law, or both or neither. So this is just a map of the United States which shows the states that have that. Now, to provide some statistical analyses on the results of adoption of stand your ground laws, there has been an increase in homicide rates in the states that have adopted stand your ground laws, with 28 to 33 additional white males per month being murdered and an increase in ER visits as well as hospitalizations. There's further been a 40% increase in justifiable murders in states that have SYG laws and a 23% increase in non-justified homicides. Now, here's just some charts and tables that highlight the figure that visualizes these statistics. The chart on the left shows the homicide rates in stand your ground and non-stand your ground states pre and post SYG laws, while the table on the right shows emergency room visits and hospitalizations in non-SYG and SYG states. From these two charts, you can see that there has been an increase in both homicides and hospitalizations in states that have adopted stand your ground laws. These next two charts are further visual empirical evidence on the impact of stand your ground laws. The bar graph on the left shows the homicide rates in SYG and non-SYG states, but it's in terms of justifiable and non-justifiable homicides and breaks it down in terms of race. Whereas the chart on the right shows homicide rates between non-SYG and SYG states, however it's less descriptive. But you can see from both these charts that there is a definitive increase in states that have adopted stand your ground laws in terms of homicide rates. Specific to Florida alone, since its adoption of the Standard Ground Law in 2005, homicide rates have more than tripled in that state alone. So there's definite evidence that these standard ground laws are actually having the opposite effect, and are not no longer protecting the people, but having a negative impact. Now to close, a number of shooting incidents have reignited attention over standard ground laws in the United States, particularly the incident that occurred where 17-year-old Trayvon Martin was fatally shot by Community Watch coordinator George Zimmerman in Sanford, Florida. His testimony was that he acted in self-defense, and under the Florida statute on justifiable use of force, he was acquitted. Now, proponents of the SYG law argue that it was designed to protect people. However, recent empirical evidence has shown an increase in homicide rates in association with the adoption of these laws. This may perhaps be due to a zero deterrence effect, where individuals are more emboldened to stand their ground, even in instances when there's no real threat to people's lives. And now, despite the implications that standard ground laws provide public safety, there's evidence from statistical analyses that intimates a different story, and I submit that a serious reevaluation needs to occur in relation to these laws. Thank you very much. That concludes my speech. I hope you all have a wonderful